we've been up and around, touching all-time high, and I'm not getting calls from family members. I'm not seeing, craziness and win Lambo. It just feels really boring. I am somewhat surprised that we're not trading way higher than we are, given the backdrop of apolitical money, the debasement trade, large geopolitical actors not trusting each other anymore, inflation running rampant in the last few years. Of course, this is the perfect layup for something like Bitcoin.
Book reminder, nothing said on Supply Shock is a recommendation to buy or sell any investment or product. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and the views expressed by anyone on the show are solely their opinions, not financial advice or necessarily the views of Blockworks. Our hosts, guests, and the Blockworks team may hold positions in the company, sponsors, or projects discussed. Hey everybody, Pete Rizzo, the Bitcoin historian on X, here with another great episode of Supply Shock. Today, a news roundup. We're going to be going through a host of recent news events that have rocked the Bitcoin and crypto space. Here to discuss and break down all these news items, we're going to have Joakim Book, tenured writer and editor in the Bitcoin space, and editor of the famous Broken Money book by Lynn Alden. Joakim, welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure to be here, Rizzo.
Yeah, and excited to dive in. I know that I've asked you to sort of put together sort of a list of stories that you were excited about. You and I have worked together on a few different projects in the Bitcoin space, so always trust your news acumen and focus. And I thought this would be fun to kind of, we really on the show kind of interview single guests. Usually they're making announcements or giving a hot take on something, but for this, it just feels like there's so much that's happened of late. This recent Bitcoin and crypto market crash, everybody, of course, the Uptober enthusiasm, the big question, how will the market evolve? So why don't you take us into what's on your list, and we'll catch the people up who have been watching Supply Shock but missing the news.
Yeah, the Bitcoin space keeps us on our toes, that's for sure. Somebody told me this weekend that it's like dog years. We live 7 years in 1 year, and it's constantly just things happening. Right, we barely come off the paper Bitcoin summer and the treasury companies left and right, and now we got tariffs, and now everything's collapsing. The cryptos are falling apart. We have the debasement trade. Gold is ripping. Everything is happening.
Yeah, well, there's no sleep in Bitcoin. I don't know how many years it is, but certainly nobody's sleeping much around here. But so. First story that caught your interest, I know, was talking about this New York Stock Exchange investment in Polymarket. Obviously, Polymarket, this show, very focused on Bitcoin and Bitcoin principles. Polymarket, really the big success story in the crypto space broadly. I think challenging a lot of Bitcoiners to kind of think about product market fit. I was on stage at the Digital Asset Summit earlier this year interviewing Peter Todd, and I said, name a product in the space or project in the space that you think is successful, and he said Polymarket. He said, I don't need it. I don't think it's as decentralized as it claims, but it's impossible to argue with the success, which is Polymarket is mainstream. It's defining the conversation. And in this case, showing the blurring of worlds between exchanges, right? Today, a prediction market is a distinct exchange, a stock exchange is a distinct exchange. In a post-Bitcoin world, maybe not so much.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful rags to riches story from almost nowhere. You become this massive prediction market. And at some level, economists have been talking about this philosophizing about this for ages, right? That what is a financial market? What does finance do? At some level, it guesses at the future, right? And so you're not too far away from predicting and prediction markets then. And there are plenty of economists who have been like, yeah, we should just have prediction markets in all sorts of things. And you can't really build them in a traditional financial world, but you can build them on crypto. So Polymarket did just that and became this massive thing. And I think they got a lot of attention in and around the election when they predicted things better than a lot of the 2024
calling the states that were going for certain candidates. Yeah.
And famously they predicted Trump better and sooner, I believe, than most of the other traditional outlets. And also the coolest thing about it, when it was clear during election night, Bitcoin was ripping. Like the first financial indicator to tell us the election result was Bitcoin going higher. Yeah, so the news here was that actually now you have this, upstart, rebellious outsider building prediction markets in the crypto world, getting acquired, or at least partially, by the New York Stock Exchange. So now we come full circle. We build prediction markets outside of the established system, and then this established system buys a share of you and trying to bring you in again. So that was I
Well,
found
in
that
many
was,
ways, it's an interesting, almost decade-long culmination. If I think about my track record of the first prediction market that I wrote about would have been in 2015. It was called Augur. It was put together by a couple of young kids in college. This was supposed to be a decentralized prediction market. I just talked to Paul Stortz yesterday, who famously came on the scene in 2015, 2016. Talking about prediction markets, how they would impact Bitcoin, and wanting to build what was then called Hive Mind, which was sort of a Bitcoin-based prediction market. So, I asked this question to Peter on stage, but maybe we can chat about it here. Why do you think that Polymarket didn't emerge on Bitcoin? And then how has Polymarket's success changed your sort of view of the crypto space as someone who comes like myself from a more Bitcoin first perspective?
yeah. Had you asked me a couple of years ago, I'd be more, in the Bitcoin maximalist camp. And I mean, you've written famously on what a maxi is and what a maximalism means. So then it would have been more, I go away, guys. But at some level, I do think that a lot of things that happen in various cryptos are the experimental lab for Bitcoin. The best things that work in there, they come over to Bitcoin eventually. I don't know if Polymarket is that kind of business. Maybe they run differently. I'm not so sure. But they've definitely proven that they have some kind of value, right? They're doing predictions better than polling, better than established news, better than financial markets to some extent. And at some level, that's what a financial market is. So it makes perfect sense that they're merging in a sense, that the New York Stock Exchange is now a co-owner of Polymarket. I can envision a future where you have the New York Stock Exchange and Polymarket being the same thing, and crypto and traditional finance is the same thing. And this is just how you bet on the future. Like betting on American companies is not that different from betting on a soccer game at the end of the day.
Well, of course, in this week, Polymarket coming out and accepting Bitcoin. So, worlds melding there, melging. I don't think it's a word, melding there as well. Okay, let's flip the page on the next news item. The government shutdown, obviously, initially very bullish for Bitcoin. Government shutdown. I think that day, picked up substantially in terms of market developments. But again, sort of showing how Bitcoin and the government, sort of order, are intertwined in interesting ways. Your take on the government shutdown, which is still ongoing as of this recording?
Pretty ridiculous, I think. The entire shutdown, I have a spicy take there that people are putting way too much attention here, and this is all mostly a media rouse. Like, shutdown doesn't mean anything. Like, people don't get paid for a while, and then they get back paid once Congress has figured their stuff out. So I mean, it is such small amounts of money that they're talking about. It's a drop in the ocean in the big fiscal budget. It makes no difference at the end of the day. So the fact that all these outlets, from Financial Times to the Fortune or every other outlet, running things like, oh my God, Bitcoin and gold are rallying as the government is shutting down. It was nice SEO. I'm sure somebody had to make this argument, but it's ridiculous. It's way too little money. It makes no difference. There is a good conversation to be had, though, whether, political uncertainty pushes us towards, apolitical money. And if gold and Bitcoin are those sort of outside of the system assets that you don't need to rely on a government functioning for them to have value and to operate and to move about. Bitcoin more so than gold, because gold is stuck in vaults.
Yeah, it's classic. Is Bitcoin part of the Mag 7, or is it, really sort of a hedge trade like gold, or somewhere in the middle? I'm sure you'd have an interesting view on that as an economics minded person. Obviously, Bitcoin defies categories in a lot of respects, and so it seems to be defying categories here, I would argue.
Yeah, and it's a typical conversation. The correlation that Bitcoin has with S&P 500, with Mag 7, with gold, and it comes and goes. And it's like, if you look at these like correlation graphs over time, it's like, oh, really, really high correlation, neutral, negative correlation with whichever asset, and it just comes and goes in different seasons. And right now, it's kind of correlated to gold, I think. But
not enough, right?
Not enough, right? Yeah, lately not enough. But and then like I dug out some academic research, some financial economists actually like crunching the numbers from back in 2021. It's like, yeah, there's zero correlation whatsoever. And you plot out a longer time frame from like 2015 and up until now, yeah, 2021 happened to be this time period where there was a low correlation or no correlation whatsoever. So it comes and goes. I have no idea. Nick Bhatia likes to say Bitcoin breaks all the models. That's sort of how I think about this too. Like maybe there's a correlation for now, maybe there isn't. Does there universally have to be a correlation between hard monies like gold and silver and Bitcoin? Nah, I don't think so.
Well, there is one interesting aspect of this, right? With is the government shutdown is now taking place at a time when the government has actually pledged to deliver certain things for the industry, right? So, famously, the Republican Party kind of came out saying that they would have market structure bill sort of in place to be voted on in the Senate by the end of September. Article out from Politico today, basically saying, this looks like it's at a crossroads again. The Republicans can't get the Democrats to the table. Government shutdown exacerbating this. So, ironically, this might be a part where a non-government money that's outside the system is now benefiting from, or is actually not benefiting from the government's own, inability to function. Because if it was functioning, as designed, perhaps that would be more bullish for Bitcoin, would actually be coming to these hearings, which are now delayed and potentially even, being pushed to next year. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you idolize and romanticize political negotiations and Congress working and the central bank doing its job and working perfectly, then there's very little need for Bitcoin, right? But we know very well that that's not the case. And we are in Bitcoin to the extent that we don't think those legacy institutions work as well as they should or could. Or even maybe they couldn't. That there's no way. There's no way you could do monetary policy in a good way, right? So somebody has their fingers on the buttons, and that's the problem. Bitcoin's response is that you don't want to have anybody with that kind of control. So maybe, but in the short term, like to the extent that Bitcoin is trading on political news, right, like market structure bills and whatever, it makes perfect sense that Bitcoin is sort of falling and not doing its thing while there's a delay. Do you see what I mean? Like to the extent that there's a political premium in Bitcoin over the summer or so because you were anticipating a market structure bill and like
I think there was a lot of that, right? Yeah, I think a lot of people saw the regulatory scenario, and for a while before this recent shutdown, it was almost like every time Trump came out and did something, he did his meme coin dinner, it was an all-time high. He's the vice president spoke at the Bitcoin conference, all-time high. And so there was a really strong correlation between Bitcoin and government activity. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. Your thoughts, market structure by the end of the year? Are you bullish?
No idea. I'm not a political junkie. I try to stay away from Washington, D.C. as much as I can. But having said that, they did just seize a bunch of Bitcoin from a Cambodian money laundering scam sort of thing.
Yeah, that's we should probably talk about that. Yeah, I believe it was 127,000 Bitcoin earmarked now for the strategic reserve.
Do you think it is earmarked for the strategic reserve, or are they just going to sell it and plop it straight into the budget deficit?
Well, I mean, legally that's the case, right? I guess all Bitcoin that's seized is earmarked for the strategic reserve. We'll see it when we can get some proof of reserves.
Yeah, exactly.
It. But
I believe it when I see it.
For now, a pretty huge coup, right? In terms of the U.S. government doubling its Bitcoin holdings overnight. Well, contrast this with what's happening in the U.K., right? So the U.K., people may know there was a similar seizure, about 61,000 Bitcoin earlier this year from another sort of international type crime ring. And so the UK government is, really openly talking about, victims' reparations, right? Essentially selling the Bitcoin to make restitution to those who were affected. Obviously, really strong sympathy there for why you'd want that outcome. But here in the United States, that Bitcoin will be set aside. I'd be interested to know how the restitution would work for the victims in that case if those circular assets are not actually being considered part of that. Kind of fascinating, actually.
Yeah, and I don't know the history of this Cambodian thing either. I don't know. It's kind of, I suppose
it sounds bad.
It sounds bad, right? I don't know if can you identify who the victims were to all of their scammy behavior? And ideally, you should just return the Bitcoin to them, but I doubt that you can seriously find them, and it'll be it'll be a total mess, and everybody bidding for the Bitcoin that they supposedly are owed.
Well, I will say if the U.S. government does have over 300,000 Bitcoin, I think it then becomes almost impossible for another government to catch up to the United States at any point. With 100, if the number was in the 170 range. Very possible that the U.S. was under some sort of threat there. But if you take Scott Bessent at his word, $17 billion worth of Bitcoin plus $15 billion worth of Bitcoin, $32 billion worth of Bitcoin, you're getting pretty close to, a Cynthia Lummis type debt repayment potentially at some point.
Maybe, but even like I trained as a financial historian. I go back to the sinking funds of the 1700s, 1800s, right? Like if you have an asset that appreciates faster than the cost of your debt, why pay off the debt? Just ride the assets.
So you're saying like the U.S. government should actually just keep the debt and keep the Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Like the sinking funds of the past, you held assets like government bonds, and you paid the interest yourself basically. So the sinking fund got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so basically it's a nerdy way to repay debt out of the budget by not paying off the debt, by paying interest into a thing that you control. So I guess for that analogy to work, you need the sinking fund to own Bitcoin and treasuries and take some of the interest payment from the treasury. I don't know, but yeah, I mean it's like it's almost a sailor kind of speculative attack. Then you just hold the Bitcoin and issue debt and roll it over.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it will be interesting to follow the case as it develops. Obviously, it really makes you. I think that the strategic reserve now, it might even continue to grow in other new interesting ways. And I'd be interested about the international component of this. Right, there are other agencies and governments involved. Do they have claim on some of this Bitcoin? Hard to say, right? Who gets the spoils?
Yeah, exactly. And it's all a little political game right now. We don't really know what to trust. Like my understanding is that the strategic Bitcoin reserve is only an executive order. I don't know how strong that is. I'm not a lawyer, but I'd much rather see an act of Congress actually saying, "Hey, here's a pot of Bitcoin that we're going to hold on to, and it belongs to the United States of America." But I don't think we have that, and so they can probably change their mind on a whim.
Next up, we got Bitcoin all-time high. Your commentary, it's really boring.
Yeah.
And
this is hopelessly outdated.
Take us into that.
This is hopelessly outdated because I did last week, and then things happen on Friday. So yeah, we get what we ask for sometimes in Bitcoin. But yeah, we've been up and around, touching all-time high, and I'm not getting calls from family members. I'm not seeing craziness and when Lambo. It just feels really boring. Like the taxi drivers are not shilling me various coins and telling me about how much money they made in Bitcoin. So it feels really boring. So I'm wondering, what are we doing? But then Friday happened and Bitcoin collapsed, and
I think excitement is our greatest, and entertainment is our greatest export. Is it boring? I don't know. I managed to never find Bitcoin boring, but I mean, certainly there's less fanfare around this all-time high, right? Yeah. I think in a lot of cases, Bitcoin is starting to feel inaccessible to like the average person, and I think that the institutions really are driving the narrative right now. So I think it's a bit of a different flavor, right? I mean, there's the structural aspects of the Bitcoin market have changed so considerably since 2020, right? Where it was a retail driven, phenomenon, zero interest rates. People, the government was sort of mailing people money, and people were buying exotic cryptocurrencies. Now you sort of have none of that, and because of that, I mean, there's it's less of the Wild West, but I think with the institutions coming online, right, there's I do think Bitcoin is going to get integrated into the existing financial system in some interesting ways. And, maybe boring. I don't know. It's a different flavor of interesting, right? When does retail come back, I think, is really the question that you're asking. And I don't know, right? There's been this huge educational outpouring to try to get the retail revolution back, but I don't know. What does it? What do you think?
I don't know. I'm not sure retail has much money left. Like all the Bitcoiners are already all in. They've already sold all their shares. They've already taken out all the 2% mortgages they can and bought Bitcoin. So yeah, I don't really see it. What I do see is like whenever we put this bull cycle up against the other ones, this one is really boring. Like we're not going anywhere.
Well, especially I think the big question is if it tops out and 124 is the new sort of cycle top, I think then you're sort of getting into a lot of the CAGR type, valuations of the treasury companies start to break down. And I actually think that's a pretty fascinating aspect of this is that, there's been so much more in contrast to past cycles, financial modeling going into the construction of, different strategies around the industry. I've been saying we saw a double top at 60K in 2021. If we see the triple top at 120,
yeah.
I think there'd be a lot of unhappy people. I'll quote Whale Panda from Twitter, basically saying, what's the point of owning Bitcoin if it's going to underperform, the S&P for the next 5 or 6 years? Can we really be calling it a digital gold? Can we really be promoting it as this kind of open wealth, transformer when, people could be benefiting more buying just regular financial products.
Yeah, or just gold itself. I mean, you look at the hockey stick of gold and you're like, wow, that's what you expect Bitcoin to do. and we're in a weird, 2025 has been a weird Bitcoin year.
Gold's up, Bitcoin's up, the dollar's up. I mean, I think it's what's even more fascinating that people are discounting is that, if stablecoins come to market and increase the buying power of the dollar and the financial performance of it. I mean, you could even see, some scenarios where, maybe some of this money printing is counteracted by the development of the kind of crypto finance sphere. So lots to come there potentially.
Totally.
Next up, we've got the New York Times publishes a crypto scam story, once again, equating Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to scams. It sounds like you dug into this one about a Philip Shishkin. Want to give us the TLDR?
A little bit. I think this is a perfect, not to get too conspiratorial about the media landscape in the US, but it's the perfect trinity of bad things coming together. You have Eastern European, or in this case, Caucasian, because Georgia, the country. You have Eastern European autocrats, like not exactly democratic rulers. You have that, and you have shady Bitcoin stuff, and then you have oligarchs in that country, sort of controlling the country and also having their shenanigans in Bitcoin. And so there was a long investigative piece in the New York Times, which I find fascinating because the New York Times rarely writes about Bitcoin at all. So on the one hand, I'm very happy that they're writing about Bitcoin, and we're in the high finance, high media now. Like we're respectable and we're interesting enough to write about. On the other hand, it is the same narrative of crypto equals scam, Bitcoin is for bad people, and look at these bad players in the world using Bitcoin, so it can't be a good thing, right? That's a sort of undertone entire thing. I was both happily surprised and same old.
If you were to ask me, is a recession coming? The first question should be, is the market going down? This is why the forward guidance is way more important than the actual policy.
I'm Felix, host of the Forward Guidance podcast, and somebody who's wildly obsessed with all things macro and crypto and where the two worlds collide.
Once we look to the world through this lens of the debasement of fiat currency, we realize there's actually only two assets that outperform this.
10-year yields went from 360 to 480 in 5 months while the Fed was raising rates. Sorry, Jay Powell, that was a rejection of the policy.
Whether it's Michael Howell breaking down global liquidity or Joseph Wang dissecting monetary policy, we talk to the best and brightest so you can always stay on top of the most important stories driving macro.
You add up tariffs and big beautiful bill, the train is stopped. In fact, it's going in reverse.
A year ago was the first time in 25 years of doing this that every little single thing that I looked at told me to sell.
We cover everything from inflation to interest rates to bonds and Bitcoin and all the biggest forces shaping the global economy. Subscribe to Forward Guidance and stay one step ahead of the next big move.
Yeah, I was actually catching up with an old journalist from the CoinDesk days the other day, and been out for 4 or 5 years, and we were talking about just, at what point does the mainstream media start to reevaluate Bitcoin and crypto through the lens of it being a successful industry that has made progress, or in the case of even Bitcoin, we had not really caught up since I had left CoinDesk, and I talked a lot about, in starting helping reboot Bitcoin Magazine, the idea was to make a thesis-driven publication where there was more of a actual assessment and value and judgment call on how the space was being developed. We really haven't seen the mainstream media do that, right? There's probably a point in time where the internet writing about the internet was very critical, and then there's a point in time where it was sort of accepted, as part of the economy and information networks, right? But for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, it's largely, I think, escaped that, right? So we don't see the mainstream media adjusting their view on what Bitcoin is, or even just taking Bitcoin's 16-year success track record and suggesting that maybe it's something other than a scam.
Yeah, exactly. We do get a couple of negative takes now and again, especially the Financial Times and the Alphaville people. I love to read them. Shout out to them. But they're always negative, and they're always sarcastic, and they're always snarky. So it's like they haven't really learned. But at least, like, if we take a step back and we think about what the media landscape on Bitcoin was 2021, 2019. It was, we're boiling the oceans. This is for criminal. This is money laundering. And it's like, there's a little bit of this in the article mentioned here. But boiling the ocean has largely gone away. I don't see that anymore.
Yeah, true.
And if anything, like the Bitcoin mining is the thing that makes renewable energy work. That thesis is getting stronger. Bitcoin mining unlocks untapped energy all around the world. Like that's fantastic. I don't see it too much in mainstream media, but I think the critical voices are at least quiet and it's neutral. So that's an improvement. And now we associate them with shady characters in the Caucasian mountains doing undemocratic things. It's like, okay, fine, reasonable, money for enemies and all that. I can't really stop somebody with bad intentions to use it.
I've been surprised at the stories that they haven't covered, right? You think about Bhutan starting to mine Bitcoin and then using that for its, to fund some of its, citizens' health benefit programs. It's a really fascinating story that's kind of escaped the New York Times. Well, of course, I communicate with some of the journalists there and talk to them regularly about, some of the issues. But, since the sort of Trump story, I think, has gone cold, that's really been the narrative that they've been following, and anything outside of that. But I think that misses a lot, right? It misses sort of what's happening where, globally there have been so many countries that have politicians inside them that are seeking to advance the industry. I think the other big story that's really gone totally missed is the development of the stablecoin infrastructure. And then from China, Korea, and Russia, really feeling geopolitical pressure to get active in the crypto market. Even Russia, changing its tune a couple of times, probably on the cusp of, through the central bank, getting retail cryptocurrency use, which is today banned, reactivated. But yeah, I think that'll be a fascinating thing to see play out too. And if you're asking me, like, okay, why wouldn't the New York Times be interested in a geopolitical competition to increase state hegemony through the crypto system? I'm stumped on that one, unfortunately.
Well, so you mentioned that you met a journalist friend of yours. What do they say? How do they think about Bitcoin?
Oh, well, this person was coming at it from being an investigative journalist kind of back in the 2017-18 era, really kind of doing some good muckraking around, these different ICO type deals that were coming together and some of the, kind of coins that had kind of come apart and had spent a few years off of it. But yeah, so, she echoed the same thing of being kind of seeing this as part of the Trump story and not really being able to separate and she even made the claim that, the industry was kind of on its last life before Trump. And to which I said, trust me, I think that we would have found some way to make a self-serving narrative for ourselves, had Bitcoin, had Kamala Harris won. I think that she would be taking credit for the Bitcoin and crypto pump that would have inevitably come.
You think so? I'm more on the Jason Meyer train. So the author of A Progressive Case for Bitcoin, he wrote a big read for us at Bitcoin Magazine a couple of months back, where he basically says this was a short-term trade. We got positive feedback. We got into the financial system. We got the Trump pump, let's say, but we alienated half the country by doing that. So all these people who could have, there is an alternative path in which left-wing people or left-leaning people, Kamala Harris's of the world, the New York Times, the inner workings of the New York Times would have grasped Bitcoin. But now they have Trump blinders in front of them. So there's no way. It doesn't matter how many success stories of Bhutan or working through problems of remittances or Bitcoin mining unleashing trapped energy. It doesn't matter because it's associated with Trump now. So we stuck.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly my impression that mainstream media is stuck on that point, right? But, obviously the politicians, I'm sure the Democrats, will see benefit. And we have now, Democrat running in California, the Democrats supporting a lot of crypto and Bitcoin bills. So, I think they'll be continued to brought to the table through, the success of the industry, right? That's the story, right? The government is here because Bitcoin has been successful. If they could have regulated out of existence, they would have. That was the preferred path for the first the Trump administration to the Obama administration to, the Biden administration. So, I think, somebody was going to respond to the success. I think it would have been the Democrats, if not the Republicans. Would it have been the same full-on industry embrace? No, I think it would look a lot different. There'd be more winners picked, more selective kind of government involvement. But here we are, and always fascinating. So, all right, next up we've got Jemima Kelly, the FT. So she's back. Jemima, our favorite FT columnist.
Love her.
But she stayed away for so long. She was.
She did. I think she was at a couple of Bitcoin conferences back in 2022, 23, something.
Yeah, I had some very fascinating interactions with her.
Yeah.
I don't think I can. Well, so like, there's another older FT columnist who's actually quite savvy on Bitcoin and crypto, and was a staunch critic of the industry, Isabella Kaminska, who now does her own sort of reporting, but is one of the most brilliant journalists that I've ever worked with or ever talked to. And yeah, there was a sort of effort to try to kind of talk to her about some of the more, these kind of like intellectual aspects of the industry that she could lock into. But then she got into a bit, let's just say she got into a bit of a screaming match with a certain Bitcoin podcaster, and they had to be separated by some security, and it was largely but I think the FT likes being the heel, right? They like kind of embracing that role. I mean, they've been kind of making fun of the Bitcoin and crypto world since, back in 2014, 2015. So, is there anything new here? I think they know their audience, right? And or they at least know what their writers want to write about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, maybe I'm the fool here because I keep clicking on the articles, right? I keep reading them, so I'm validating their existence to some extent. But yeah, this one is it's kind of crypto skullduggery isn't the bug; it's the whole point. And I think she kind of has good content here, and I think that is if to tie it back to the previous topic, this is the connection that Democrats have right now. If they want to hold something over Trump and Republicans, yeah, look at all the shenanigans that they've been doing in the crypto space, like issuing meme coins, getting foreign powers to suspiciously buy certain coins, and maybe in exchange of favors here.
I keep telling people, I was like, because there was another journalist I was talking to. She was really bent out of shape about the Trump stuff, and she was like, "Oh, well, he's making all this money," and I was like, "Well, just think how fun the story will be to cover when he loses all his money," because again, it's like you're depriving yourself of like the real joy that will come from the downfall of these things. Because again, it's like it's almost like Trump launching his own stablecoin is like Bill Clinton launching his own ISP. Like, it's like ridiculous to think that like, the presidential, internet service provider like would have endured. And so like, or like, Bill Clinton like running his own mail server. Right. And so like, Clinton mail, like, like, sure. It's like Bill Clinton could, or Al Gore, like could have launched Gore mail. But like, yeah, that probably would have gone to zero. And so, yeah, I think to the folks who are still holding out for, like, are still mad about like Trump, making all this money on crypto, like just think about all the money he's going to lose, like when these projects, just go to zero. So you're, if you're mad now, just think about the later enjoyment, for the future joy. We have to have a low time preference view towards the possibility of future joy, I think.
Yeah. So the upside here for us recovering Bitcoin maxis is that in the word Bitcoin isn't even in this article. It's all about crypto.
Okay.
Like, I mean, okay, I'll take that.
We'll take it. All right. Last but not least, we've got Tether, stablecoins. The Bitcoin dollar thesis is heating up. Shout out to Mark Goodwin, writing, of course, that modern classic, underappreciated as it is. Tether going out to market, basically raising a large amount of money, of course, in no shortage of money, investing in all sorts of exotic, esoteric businesses, from soccer clubs to gold miners, and looking to do more. Obviously, the USAT stablecoin, backed by the former U.S. crypto lead, digital asset leads Bo Hines, a big story as well. But Tether, the behemoth, the juggernaut.
The behemoth.
What are your thoughts?
It's crazy that they raised this amount of money at that valuation, and it's already one of the most profitable companies in the world, being 17 employees or whatever it might be. Like, it's a fantastic business model.
Yeah, the extent to which they're going to face competition in the U.S. from the banks, I think, is significant, right? So I think, like, when I see this, it's, of course, Tether's coming out and saying we're doing this from a position of strength. I think that might not be the case, right? I think that the banks are going to want the stablecoin market. I think that they have access to so many more users. And then, if you're Tether, you're sort of blocked towards the consumer outlet through, Coinbase and through the other major exchanges, which have a preferential relationships with the USDC. In most cases, in the case of Coinbase, there's a clear ownership structure there. In other cases, it's just simply, people who have been onshored and had regulatory approval for a while. So, yeah, I think the Tether story is interesting, right? I think that, they also have their gold-backed stablecoin. They've also been willing to launch other stablecoins. And maybe they start to try to serve some of these other governments like China, Russia, Korea that want to launch their own stablecoins. Certainly an interesting player, but I do think it says a lot about where the U.S. market is heading, which is, probably within the next 6 to 12 months, stablecoins being, heavily embedded into most U.S. financial applications.
Yeah, you don't have to be overly conspiratorial to see that Treasury is struggling to find buyers for its debt, right? Like every other central bank is either stagnant or selling treasuries. The Fed is actively reducing its balance sheet and has done so for 3 years now. Who's going to buy all this debt? You need to roll over trillions and trillions every year. Somebody's going to buy it. And Tether has become this, like, at least maybe these guys can do it, right? But so far they're way too small, and they need to suck up basically vacuum all the deposits of the developing world, turn them into stable coins, and then maybe there's some financing for the U.S. Treasury there. So I mean, it's a compelling story. It gets all the financial people and the conspiratorial Tethers taking over the world, people in the room together, and it is an interesting story. So Mark Goodwin was early on it. Like, shout out to him.
Yeah, I think, Mark, I've always been, I always thought that the stablecoin apparatus was, something to be skeptical of. And I think he did a really good job of early on seeing that, the crypto world would ultimately kind of embrace dollarization. We talked a lot about this, and, the other aspect of it being that, most savings for millennials are ironically in the stocks and equities of these tech companies. And so, you sort of end up kind of having this nice alignment where, the stablecoin infrastructure through the crypto ecosystem being sort of the last big dragon for Bitcoin. Of course, he has, some very convicted, has a high amount of conviction that this is a net negative for the world. And of course, I invite you to read the Bitcoin Dollar. I think I'm a little bit less sure about those sort of predictions, though I do think the core thesis and sort of warning about some of the problems, right? I think stablecoins are going to be CBDCs in everything but name. They are coming soon, and I think we should be very skeptical about the folks who want this future for the world. But we've talked on this podcast a little bit about the America First Bitcoiners, the sort of emergence of people for whom, America is number one, and Bitcoin sort of serves the needs of America. That's kind of how I like to think about the Trump folks. And it'd be nice to see some Bitcoin first, approach to that. But right there's a lot of people convinced that the United States is a ethical and moral leader of the world that, deserves its distinction as world leader. And so,
So go back a couple of years when I don't know what year would be appropriate, probably pre-pandemic or around there. Circle was coming online, trying to rival Tether, right? Being this backed by established financial players, being regulated. I think they even branded themselves as the regulated stablecoin at one point. You'd think they have, like, going back to that timeline and then predicting forward, which one's going to be the biggest stablecoin? It's like, maybe they have a pretty good way of becoming the best one, becoming the biggest one. You are issuing dollar-denominated assets or liabilities, so maybe it's a good thing to have regulation and to be tapped into to the dollar establishment there. And I'm just pulling it up, and 76 billion versus 180 billion for Tether. It's like Tether's still a leader, unquestionably. And they were these like rogue people, offshore, unregulated, and the world just
all the great crypto success stories were very unloved when they first almost universal. I have this rule of saying that if you really want to know something that'll be successful in Bitcoin and crypto, it's almost always the case that there's like a near universal repugnance to the idea. Tether was very much that. NFTs were very much that. ICOs, I would say, there was a broad disdain for like these things that then sort of evolved and kind of took on life of their own. Even the Bitcoin renewable energy narrative, I think, was widely hated, and sort of people's first reactions, I think, is that the Bitcoin industry sort of made that up, and obviously we now know that there are empirical studies that back that up. I think that. The tides are turning slowly.
It's a crazy space. It's a crazy world.
We're winding down here. I gotta get your thoughts on the sort of end of the year. From an economist perspective, there's been this sort of 4-year cycle in Bitcoin, right? It's this idea that the halving and sort of the supply shocks in Bitcoin are propelling it forward. Your thoughts if really we don't see some sort of, does this change the thesis for Bitcoin in your view?
No. I mean, I do like the efficient market hypothesis. I've always repelled people who say that intrinsic value of Bitcoin is zero by pointing to the market price. Like the very fact that it's there and it's been there for a very long time suggests that it's not zero. So when prices do go down, I do adjust my priors like a good analyst, and I think that there's something wrong. That there's something broken. At least I need to revisit my baseline assumptions. And I am somewhat surprised that we're not trading way higher than we are, given the backdrop of apolitical money, the debasement trade, large geopolitical actors not trusting each other anymore, inflation running rampant in the last few years. Of course, this is the perfect layup for something like Bitcoin, right? And so it is kind of weird that we're not higher than we are. As for the 4-year cycle, it doesn't make much sense anymore. Like I'm not going to go on a limb and say it's broken and we're going to go up forever. But the fact that the issuance rate is so small compared to the outstanding stock, and the financial institutions are here. So, in the beginning of Bitcoin's journey, you issued so much extra supply all the time. So halving made a massive difference. Now it doesn't make that much of a difference. And also the miners aren't selling, right? They're just stacking. Like they're trying to become treasury companies, all of them. So
some of them are.
Yeah. So we're in a weird position, right? Like, is this time different? Yeah, kind of. In many different ways. It's a really boring answer, but I wouldn't be surprised if the 4-year cycle breaks. I also wouldn't be surprised if it has some kind of institutional legacy, incumbency, behavioral type. Because it can't be practically speaking, it can't be the new supply coming to market that makes a difference, right? But it could be that it's so ingrained in Bitcoiners that we have a 4-year cycle, so we sort of make it a 4-year cycle, even though it's not there.
Well, of course, the verdict's out. We'll see as the calendar turns. No stranger to large corrections here. Of course, saw a 35 to 40% correction earlier this year. So, assuming one of those is on the table again, perhaps, maybe we'll get there. Joakim, where can people find out more about your work? How can they follow you out there in the Bitcoin world?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Noster. Just Google my name, Joakim Book. That's the handle. All of my writing can be found at something called Authory, authory.com/Joakim Book. I collect everything. I write for the institute you see behind me. I got a shout out, American Institute for Economic Research. So kindly lending me their media room for today. I write for them as well. I write for the Mises Institute. Yeah, I'm out there.
We appreciate it, and thanks for bringing all your insights to the conversation. If you want to check out all of the great content on Blockworks, you can go to blockworks.co. Of course, hit that like and smash that subscribe button. Check out the other great podcasts around. If you're looking for different views on the news of the week, you can go and check out the many other podcasts on the network. Folks giving you a Solana first perspective, soon to be folks giving you an ETH first perspective, and then, of course, a macro perspective. Check out those topics. Check out those titles. Forward Guidance and others coming to you, and blockworks.co. You can check it out. So this has been Supply Shock, a Blockworks podcast.